Muscle memory. Fishing for freshwater pearls in Scotland. According to Julius Caesar, gossipy biography, Suetonius, the freshwater pearls enticed the Romans across the Channel to invade Britain. Caesar, enthusiastic connoisseur of gems and art, enjoyed weighing individual pearls in his hands, perhaps contemplating whether the aquatic spoils would be worth facing down the belligerent north. In the end, the tribes in the land that is now Scotland proved unfriendly, and the Romans found it easier to source fine marine pearls from the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, or the Indian Ocean. But the idea that it was pearls that changes the course of history, that gave us the cities of London and Bath, decent roads, asparagus and cucumbers, calendar and currency, is irresistible. We might owe Jane Austen's persuasion to the inconspicuous European pearl mussel, Margaritifera. Pearl-bearing mussels thrived in northern hemisphere rivers and lakes. From Japan and northern Asia, across Europe and North America, while many species survived millions of years, human industry culled an animal that relied on pristine waterways and was acutely sensitive to heavy metal pollution. Before the Industrial Revolution, some of the rivers that flow through our northern cities hosted prolific colonies of mussels that produce gems of such quality that were compared to Indian Ocean pearls and fooled jewelers into thinking they were oriental. They were fashioned into ropes and stitched onto clothing. Portraits of pearl-decked Tudor kings or Habsburg princesses adaptfully portray freshwater as well as marine gems. At times, freshwater pearls glutted the markets, but today fishing for these stones is banned in many countries. Small cohorts of pearl mussels survive in remote rivers, but they are long extinct in our industrial and agricultural heartlands. The tale of Scotland's ruined pearl industry is a narrative echoed around the world, but it's also a model for hope. This small country, now a global stronghold of Margaritifera, wrought the destruction but sought the restoration of a species that is a barometer of entire ecosystem health. Here in macroecosystem is a story of loss and redemption, whose lessons ripple outwards. For countries, for countless hundreds of thousands of years, Margaritifera secretly formed pearls in Scottish waters. The long-living invertebrate might survive for 2 centuries, then release its treasure to be jostled and ground among the river gravel, freeing its calcium to flow to the ocean and sustain other lives. Pearls lie hidden too in the streams, small tributaries of Scotland's human history. They are uncovered in museums and archives where they wait almost as covered as the mussels in which they grew. In the National Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh, on a locket that belonged to the ill-fated Mary, Queen of Scots, pearls twine around the gold-bordered portraits of Mary and her son James as milk teeth, and on a ring that belonged to another crushed hero, Bonnie Prince Charlie, tiny seed pearls overlay a lock of his hair. Once they picked out the initial CR, Carlos Rex, King Charles, but now these letters are as ruined as his attempt to capture the British throne. In Edinburgh Castle, freshwater pearls glow on the Scottish crown jewels, though the polished gold and other glittering gems tended to steal the show. Rare pearls trickle through royal inventories, jewels, and written notes on a late 16th century map of Loch Tay, Perthshire, mark the presence of watery bedfellows, salmon, trout, eels, and pearls. Count books track pearls in Europe in the hands of Dutch merchants. Travelers admire them fastened around the necks of Stockholm's finest. After enormous pearl was found in Aberdeenshire in 1620, laws stipulated that all pearl fished from Scottish rivers belonged to the crown, and the biggest and finest were to be reserved for the king's use. Another act of parliament restricted pearl wearing to the upper classes. The pearl poacher's punishment was warding a lane of theme in the stockies, being arrested and tossed in the stocks. Running alongside these official histories are those of the summer walkers, the Gaelic-speaking traveling people of the Scottish Highlands, who were the unofficial custodians of freshwater pearls. They spent the summer on the road in rural Scotland, living under canvas, selling small household necessities and horses that they had broken in winter to isolated crofters and fishing for pearls. They fished Scotland's great wildfire rivers, the Spray, the Tay and Oikel, the Conon and Naver, and talked of pearls the same way whiskey makers talk of single malts. It's the water that crafts the pearl. Its clarity, the minerals and oxygen, and the sunlight filtering down to a clean bed of cobbles all create the river ecology of which pearls and pearl mussels are one small but essential part. Show me a pearl and I'll name the river, boasted one of the last pearl fishers, Eddie Davis, to the ethnographer. The river created the pearl, and the pearl mussel made the river. The summer walkers knew exactly which spot in the river was most hospitable to pearl mussels. A stable riverbed of pebbles, larger cobbles and boulders with fine gravel into which they could burrow. Because mussels, like most of us, prefer company and a little shade, the summer walkers scanned the water for patterns of dappled sunlight below overhanging boughs. If the light fell on a flat, a current visibly running through a pool, very likely black mussel would be sitting there like rows of crows. Sometimes the water was so clear they could see the mussels on the riverbed, but most often they peered through a glass-bottomed basket. Pearl fishing relied on sharp eyes, as what they were seeking wasn't the smooth, healthy shells, but ones they called crooks twisted by the pearl inside. Traditionally, their only other tool was the rod of young hazelwood, just under 3 meters, 9 feet long, with a cleft at the end to pluck the mussel from its bed. Opening the mussel with another shell, they might, with the luck of the wise, spy a pale cyst and lift out a pearl, mucus covered like newborn. But the summer workers weren't, by conventional measures, all the luck. Although they enjoyed holiday views, the work was bed-breaking and the living precocious. Like most traveling people in Europe, they were sometimes malign, accused by gamekeeper of poaching salmon or by fishermen of ruining their sport. There were rumors that they stole children. Like most marginalized group, they kept to themselves and had their own language, a Kaval tongue that was a variant of Gaelic, safe for private conversation. In this language, a pearl was enach from skyo, something big from the water. Most natural pearls are small. Occasionally, they would find a pearl large enough to sell in a Highland town for 20 pounds. But the optimism of their language kept them going. The existence of pearl in Magratifera is as such of a miracle as the existence of the mussel, as the animal relies on an exquisitely tuned relationship with its environment in early summer. Female mussels inhale the sperm shed by males and for a few weeks nurture their fertilized eggs on their gills. Around August, they released their larvae into the river, ejecting fine, wide spumes like signs. The Glochidia, the tiny larva less than a 0.1 millimeter, must now find a host. Of the 1 to 4 million Glochidia, a single female mussel can eject over a day or two. Almost all are swept away. A few are inhaled by very specific juvenile fish species, the Atlantic salmon and the brown trout. The young fish respond by growing a protective cyst around the intrusion on their gills, as similarly for how the adult mussel might laser grow a pearl. More passengers than parasites, the Glochidia hitch a ride until the following spring, then drop off as juvenile mussels. Picky about their fish hosts, they are just as fickle about their new nurseries, requiring fast-flowing, clean, well-oxygenated water. Find gravel to settle in for the long haul. Like us, they mature very slowly, reaching adulthood at around 15 to 20 years of age. An abundance of juvenile mussels of different ages is a good measure of a population health. Experienced pearl fishers knew to leave the young mussels alone, as they were not yet capable of producing pearls. The anchor is laid down slowly in these cold waters, and a decent pearl might take more than a decade to form. They also understood that these slow-growing mussels were part of a delicate ecosystem, and so would patiently wait, sometimes for an entire generation, to return to a colony. But not everyone who fished for pearls respected the river, like those of almost all other countries. Scotland's pearl beds periodically collapsed when they were overfished. In the 17th century, when European aristocrats slung ropes of pearls around their necks, put them through their hair and clustered them on silk cloths, vast quantities of Scottish pearls were exported to London. By 1769, the mussel beds were exhausted, and it would be another 100 years before Scottish pearls could tempt buyers again. By then, lowland factory workers were supplementing their incomes with pearl fishing. This time around, the celebrity status lent by Queen Victoria, fondness for Scottish pearls, combined with water pollution from encroaching industry, affected another collapse. More recently, William Abernethy's discovery of an enormous spherical white pearl in the River Tay in 1967 incited another feeding frenzy. Abernethy was rumored to have been paid £11,000 for the pearl, fondly called Little Willie after its finder. Day trippers rushed to Scottish rivers to plunder the mussel beds, indiscriminately slaughtering colonies of juvenile mussels. Weekenders with their penknives would kill 5,000 mussels for just 10 pearls. By comparison, an experienced pearl fisher could take 10 pearls from 20 mussels and then return the animals to the water unharmed. The banks of remote rivers, newly accessible by car, were littered with shell mouths. Under current legislation, it is illegal to disturb mussels or damage their habitat. Fish for pearls or even possess pearls gathered after 1998, but that hasn't eradicated the problem. At least 10 times a year, Scotland's Wildlife Crime Unit is called to investigate piles of Margaritifera shells dumped in woodland or car parks or tipped into rivers. There are very few predators interested in pearl mussels. The occasional otter or odd-hooded crow might be seen plucking live mussels from their beds and smashing them. An opportunist mink might spirit a few shells to its burrow. An oyster catcher can stab abduct the mussels with its bill and prize out the sweet flesh. But in such quantities, their only real enemies are us. Pearl mussels are embedded in our written record and illuminate our cultural history, but they do better without us. Our rivers might now be cleaner, but climate change is a present, not future. The weather on the west coast of Scotland has indisputably become more dredge. It is measurably wetter and windier, and cloud cover filches more hours of precious sunshine. Some of this rain falls during cataclysmic storms. Floods scout riverbeds and wash out established mussel populations. Juveniles die when sleet clogs their gills. Because of their symbiotic dependence on fish, mussels suffer when floods destroy the gravel, spawning beds, reds or salmon and trout. Increased air and water temperature might even uncouple the delicate timing between the pearl mussels and host fish reproduction. The flood defenses we built to protect our habitations, like most other river engineering projects, destroy even more suitable habitat. Planting over the last few decades of non-native conifers such as Sitka spruce, a fast-growing high-yield crop, might have been good for the economy, but when planted right to the edge of waterways, these trees starve pearl mussels of sunlight and acidify the water. The linear ditches crossing the forest dumped peaty sediments into the streams, but recently bodies such as Forest Enterprise Scotland, which managed the National Forest Estate covering 9% of Scotland's total land area, have led efforts to replant forests along these rivers and tributaries. Conifers have been replaced with riparian woodland made up of 60% native broadleaves and 40% open habitat. These trees provide the dappled shade below of pearl mussels, regulate water temperature, and stabilize riverbanks. This benefits downstream aquatic ecology and our own homes and settlements no longer so prone to severe flooding. In many ways, pearls, this only gem made an animal, are the most human of stones, sharing our spaces and time scale. In recent history, each spruce, lined, burned, and trampled stream consigned pearls to history or the plaintive metaphors of our poets. Robert Burns, weeping briny pearls for lost love. Our rivers can run cleaner within the span of childhood, the same length of time it takes for a pearl to form. And contained in each one is the weight of a mussel's memory. Each early winter, each glorious day, or splintered light, each raw night, each soft summer of no night. The tug of the moon, the torque of our actions are locked in nacre layers. The year we built a factory, the year we tore it down, the year we damped the river, the year we freed it, the year we planted, and the year we pruned, the decades we left the beds.